I'm Sara Hettle. I am a vet tech out of Arizona. I've been with Sherwood Pet Health over 8 years now, which is crazy to say, and I switched because of a lot of health issues my crew was having. So I'll talk about some of those cases and why I'm a big believer in it now. We'll introduce you to some of those guys, but we're going to go through nutrition basically from totally up to you. If you want to, that's fine.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I can speak up too. I'm glad I'm not hoarse after talking all day. That happens sometimes. But we'll go through some of that. We're basically going to go through nutrition from Sherwood's perspective, which for a lot of you know is very different. Like, we don't recommend all the greens and things like that. But we'll hopefully tell you a little bit more about why. Like, maybe you thought that was weird or anything. I did once too. Been there, done that. But we'll go through some of that. You can go to the next one. All right. Well, nutritional balance is going to be the key to this. You're going to hear it a lot. We're going to pound it into your heads. But we really think that's the way to a healthy and happy life. It's all about the balance and not necessarily focusing on like a lot of the stuff that we tend to, like calcium and why that's not a villain. So we'll talk about that among a lot of other things. Go to the next one. All right. This. So this is basically our agenda. We're going to be talking about a lot of things. I know that's not super explanatory, but also, like I said, I'm going to introduce you to some characters like Miss Buns here, who, if anyone has struggled with one of those sensitive bunnies that either goes through stasis all the time or is prone to sludge, all these different things, that was my girl. And there is hope for those guys. I would love to help any way I can. Coming in, guys. All right. Well, you can go. We'll keep going here. I might talk fast. I apologize if I do. There will be definitely all the time in the world to reach out if you miss something or whatever. If you want the slides, there is just going to be a lot of information I'm going to hit you with. But say you are doing everything right. You know, you're feeding healthy pellets and all that, but you're still seeing issues. That's what we're here to talk about. They're kind of like giving us clues. They're like a puzzle where we have some pieces, but we haven't put it together. So hopefully this will help if you are struggling with those issues. And part of our biggest difference that you're going to hear is that we do not recommend greens. I know they're very important. And I always say the 3 Bs for bonding, begging forgiveness, and bribing is very important with rabbits. So we're just kind of trying to change that mindset that they're part of a meal or very necessary into thinking of them more as a treat and something, you know, more for those things than part of nutrition. And one of the biggest arguments to that is to say, well, these guys in nature would be eating plants. They're eating vegetation and all that. But here's where Peter Rabbit comes in. Most of them are not like Peter Rabbit with access to like these tender greens and everything all year long. And like that article actually goes into, it can actually be detrimental because a lot of those months they're eating high fiber diets. They're eating those twigs and bark and everything else, trying to survive on whatever they can. And they're also trying their best to live like 3-4 years. And we want these guys living at least a decade longer than that. So another part to that is that a lot of these things have been modified for humans. We make them sweeter, less bitter, less toxic, like eggplant and things. Carrots are actually pretty young in how, like how different. They look like roots, and now they're bright and colorful and all these things. And that's because we've wanted humans to eat them. But these guys were not developed to eat like these sugary foods. And plants store their energy as like sugars and starch and stuff to us. So for them, it's all about balance, and we'll get into more reasons. But hay is the way, and there will be a lot to cover about just hay alone. If you want to go to the next slide. So hay is the way. One part of that is that it is a prebiotic. It has all these like great bacteria they have the enzymes to break that down, but they work much slower. They ferment much slower than like the bad bacteria that feeds off like the sugars and starch and can just ferment much quicker. So they can get that dysbiosis and things like that. It also changes those cecotropes. So it's so important to eat those. They're re-ingesting those for those extra nutrients and all that. If they have like that bad bacteria or excess protein waste, which we'll get more into, they can actually produce excess cecotropes, which might be you see them lying around all over. It can also make them different flavor, which makes them less likely to want to re-ingest them. So we don't want to see any of those. You shouldn't be seeing those. And that's a little different if you have like those disabled bunnies or somebody with a really fluffy butt that may need some help, because obviously nature didn't give them big fluffy butts, so it might be a little harder to groom. We're talking about like the nutrition related issues, and that's how you get like those poopy butt and stuff like that too. So hay, very important. Go to the next one. There we go. All right, so there is a lot of reasons why we say to cut greens out. And part of that is that if they, and this is not every rabbit, but a lot of these guys, if they have option of either eating like these yummy greens or hay, they're gonna fill up a lot of the time on that hay. And I know we're told a lot of the time that to give them greens, right, to get more water into them, and you give them like soak those greens and everything. But what that can do a lot of the time is actually make them fill up on less hay, which is dry, and make them drink far less water by volume, up to 500 times less. So they're actually getting far less water when they're eating those greens, that they're eating something moist. So if you picture yourself eating watermelon versus eating crackers, you're gonna be a lot more thirsty on the crackers. It can also lead to that dysbiosis. So some of those ingredients, and we're really going to get into some cases that touch on this, dysbiosis issues. So again, you're feeding that bad bacteria that can overcome the other, can also lead to that gas and bloating and other things. And we talked about the cecotropes. You can get those poopy butt issues. I was dealing with that among dysbiosis from antibiotics and all that. So even if things are going well initially, sometimes you can get changes later on.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Absolutely.
Well, did you say these slides are available somewhere?
Yeah, I can absolutely send them to you.
Okay,
Yeah.
So maybe just let her know.
Yeah, if you want these slides, we can absolutely send them.
So you don't have to take pictures of it.
Then I'll remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to take pictures too. But yeah, we want to avoid that bad bacteria, because if you get those bunnies, you know, they have the gas and the bloat, you'll see them pressing that belly down and stuff, very painful. Just cutting those things out and focusing on like a balanced diet of really good pellets and hay can really change a lot of that. And I say experiment, really big. I almost forget that part. Very important, because we don't want you to just take our word for it. I did not. I did it over time. I cut down. I was doing salads in the afternoon. If you are feeding those things and you want to see some changes or want to see if it helps you, you can do it. Like if you're doing 2 cups, try 1 cup. If you're feeding greens at night, try just switching to the morning, because they tend to have higher ammonia and pH and all these other issues in the morning than at night. So if they're eating on a lot of hay in the afternoon, that can help. If you're doing, you know, any, like I just can say, you know, try it, see if you can get them to eat more hay, drink more water. And that's all you can do is experiment, because we want you to see it for yourself. We don't want you to just take their word for it. So I will still say that I'm experimenting and not always intentionally. This is my man, Lyric here. He's about 9.5. He's been with me for over 9 years. And he is my big boy. He is, once I would say he was very tolerant to things. He's been with me since even before my Sherwood days. And he could eat greens and stuff like that. Well, recently he kind of slowed down on eating his supplements and things like that, as a lot of these older bunnies do. And treats don't excite him anymore. So when he came to the kitchen asking me for greens, I obliged, and he enjoyed them. But for 3 days after, he was leaving these messes everywhere. And he was also having sludge, which he never does. And the weirdest thing that I've not heard other bunnies do is he had the loudest stomach grumble. Like, I mean, you could hear it across the house. And it went on for like 3 days after. So you see here, this picture at the bottom is actually his poop on the far left is normally beautiful. That's actually from a hay study I did. So 3 of those on the top are rabbits on first cut Timothy versus a rabbit who wouldn't eat it and is on a different one. So that bottom poop is not a rabbit on stasis or anything. It's literally just a difference in hay. She wouldn't eat it, so that's where that comes from. But just to show you, he normally has these big, golden, beautiful poops. So that was very alarming to me. And it was just kind of showed me that even, you know, I'm tempted to, trust me, but it can make all the difference in the world. And again, they can have higher thresholds at some point, and as they age or say they go on antibiotics. He went through pneumonia a couple years ago and things like that. Lost a partner that kind of hurt him. He was one of those that this little girl in back actually saved his life. She was found in my neighborhood, and I was like, I have a lot of rabbits, but she brought him back to life, basically. But yeah, so it can make difference. I am not perfect. I'm still going to do these things, but I love to share it with you in case you can avoid it or find your way out of problems.
What's the middle picture?
That is just, it was almost like sludgy poop. It was, yeah, just not good. If you felt that, it just feels like kind of sandpaper. It's really rough. I'll show you some sludge. Yes, the bottom is how it should look.
And then the top one?
That is all just like wet, mushy kind of poop that was all over the house, and now he's back to being clean.
From a little lettuce, huh?
Yes, just from some
The same thing
greens.
happens with mine. Yeah.
But sometimes just cutting that out alone can make a huge difference in your life.
So I cut it out, and it's getting better. I still see some little messes, but I don't know why.
But I would love to, especially if we can get and see how they do on just Sherwood alone. You can go to the next one. All right, so where does the advice come from? As I said, you know, we're some of the most dedicated parents out there, right? Rabbit people are like hawks. We're watching everything they do. Just notice a problem. You may still, even though you're trying to do everything right, you know, maybe you're feeding the organic grains or you're feeding like good pellets, or you've cut pellets out entirely, which some people tell you to do, but you know, maybe you've cut calcium, you're not giving spinach and kale, those things you think are high calcium, and you still have issues. So that's what we want to help you figure out, is put some of those puzzle pieces together. All right, so you might hear like that if you have an underweight rabbit, feed them more pellets, or you should cut them out because you have a chubby rabbit. And what I can tell you from being in a clinic is that we see a lot of obese rabbits come in there, and the client is like swearing up and down they feed this small portion pellet and the rabbit's free roaming, they have no idea, and you get all these eyebrows raised. And I 100% believe them, because there is so much more to it than that. And I like to use the example of, come on in.
Oh, is this traveling?
No, sorry.
Two doors down.
But yeah, we have like the example of 2 guinea pigs I had, which were very similar to rabbits. And I had one guy, I called him Big Wheel Pig because he was a large pig. And I had 2 next to him, in fact, Shrimp, who was a small guy. Well, those 2 little guys ate a ton of pellets, and this guy was larger. So before my sugar days again, I pulled pellets away from him for 6 months to help him lose weight, and he didn't lose anything. He didn't even care about pellets. So they're all different. We all know that, you know, they may have higher thresholds, lower thresholds, but I kind of look at it like if you have a very athletic person and then you have someone that may look very obese, donuts are still going to be unhealthy for both of those guys, whether we see that on the outside or not. And it's kind of like that. There's so much to focusing on that balance instead of just cutting or adding pellets. And that's what we're really going to talk to, is that balance. And so we're going to get into that science, that really geeky stuff that I love so much. To the next one. And I always use this chart, and I apologize for how small it's going to be, but what I want to show you, and I'll kind of point, because you may not be able to read that from far, but what this is one component of balance is looking at the proteins, which are these at the bottom here, those amino acids, so the building blocks of protein. Up here you have minerals, you have vitamins, fiber, all that good stuff. This is hay by itself, and those yellow are where they're deficient, green is where it's balanced, and red is where they have excess. So there's a couple things I want you to see. One, if you're just feeding hay, you are just going to be deficient in so many nutrients, the minerals and vitamins and things like that. That is actually a good thing, in the sense that these guys are browsing on that all day. We do not want it to be too rich. So things like feeding alfalfa as hay can be too rich, and we'll get into hay because there's a lot more to it than that, but it's going to be missing some things, and they're going to be missing some things. If you look at like some of these greens, you see there's excess in a lot of areas. You're also still deficient in those minerals, so it's really tough to use like a mixed diet of just grains and hay to balance a diet. These are our pellets. You say it's primarily green. So a lot of that is balanced, but you do see high potassium and calcium. If you look across all of these, this little guy right here that you may not be able to read is potassium, high in every single one of these. In a pellet, you can use things like chloride to balance it out, but we're not doing that with like our mixed greens. It's kind of like a reptile people feed, you know, maybe feeding a cockroach and add some calcium carbonate to get them more calcium. We're not doing that most of the time. You know, we're not supplementing those things. So it's great to have a pellet, even if you just use a small portion to fill in those gaps, because that nutrition is super important. And we'll get more into these amino acids, which are super essential to their health. We want them to have that good immune support, and part of that is that protein. So if you want to go to the next one, we'll go through that more. So again, we have our example. Here's hay, and then we have some greens. So this is basically a mixed diet. And this is just going to be an example of amino acids. So these guys, we have what's called essential amino acids, which means they need to eat them to get them out of their diet. If you are deficient in any one of those, like say right here, we have methionine at 44%. If you're deficient in one of those, you're going to be deficient in all of those because they're called a limiting amino acid at that point, and kind of like a barrel that may be perfectly intact everywhere except one plank. It's only going to hold water up to that broken plank, and the rest is going to spill out. And that's what happens to protein. So if you have all that excess protein waste, you're going to have smelly urine and things like that. Again, you can have those cecotropes laying around. So it's very important to get them all those amino acids. The pellets, Sherwood is cool because we have like a molecular biologist on the team. So he's basically used and filled in the gaps and just put in those missing amino acids versus dumping a lot more excess protein. So using like soy and things like that can cause some issues like that as well, where you get that just spilling out effect. But we'll go into that a little bit more too. All right, so what happens when it's slightly off? You have too many greens, less hay intake, you can get like those dysbiosis and all those kind of issues that we don't want, that can lead to that bloat and the pain, and even, you know, our chance for stasis goes up. So let's look at more here than that. I look at these guys as a little factory. So they have very efficient digestive systems. But what that means is generally good input means good output, but you can have all kinds of things that slow that down, whether that's nutritional or, you know, they have an injury or illness that makes them not want to eat. And like as soon as the work stops, you get all kinds of issues. Well, here we have Mr. Diggs, and I'm going to show you, like I said, some cases that I had of my own. This is Mr. Diggs, who had some nutrition-related issues and was able to correct them easily. And then you have these guys like Mr. Wilbur that actually have genetic motility issues like megacolon. And we're going to kind of go through the separate those out, what they may look like and how we can help. But we don't want you like this little guy over here going to the vet all the time. And a lot of these guys can be helped. So we're going to go through those cases next. All right, I introduced you a little to Miss Buns. Now, I will tell you that I lost her in 2024 to cancer, but she was 10 and a half and living her best life. Like, she taught me more than anybody because she was that frequent flyer. She was going through stasis all the time, to the point, you know, for the first 4 years, I thought of that as normal. Like, you're just going to deal with these things if you have rabbits. We do not want these to be normal for you. There is hope, because this girl, and it took me years to figure this out. So if I gave her the wrong treat, she would leave me the thickest sludge you've ever seen. It had like almost no liquid to it, so I don't know how it came out. She would leave cecotropes the next morning and everything like clockwork. She was very sludge prone. This was from one of her stasis events, and just to go through her a little bit to tell you, she was also one of those that I call her a bucket list bunny. She had to try everything: ear infection, respiratory infection, the abscess, the cyst in her eye, like a full-on blockage, if you've ever had that fun. She tried it all and conquered all of it until cancer. But she was amazing. So you can see here, she's got the gas in her stomach. She's got some gas down here in her cecum. She's also got sludge in her bladder, not a ton. There's much worse. But she also, I'm going to go through this. Please remember what this little colon here looks like. So that little tube there, hers is not remarkable, but I will show you, if you've ever heard that megacolon is not real, I'm going to show you exactly why, using a rabbit that Mr. Wilbur was the same breed, same size as she is. So remember that little tube right there. But all to say that it became very abnormal, and to the point that if anybody went through stasis, I know it's an absolute emergency because it's something medical. I no longer, even with her, dealt with issues that were digestive and urinary. It was always like, in fact, I don't think she even went through stasis. She went through surgery because they initially thought that cancer was abscesses under her skin. She went through biopsy, all these things, and she never went through stasis through any of it. But in fact, her ear infection, she started rolling. So that's how we figured it out, was a lot of things. But that's just to say that if you have those sensitive bunnies that never had a high threshold, that's your girl. There's still absolutely hope for them. We can go to the next one. This is Shrimp, and I know this is a bunny class, but I think he is such an ambassador. And ironically, he went through a lot too. And I adopted him a year to the day before Buns, just incidentally. And they even got abscesses around the same time. It was crazy. He healed well from that abscess, but if you've ever dealt with that antibiotic-related dysbiosis, he's one of those guys that had a very high tolerance to greens. He was about 5 when I switched to Sherwood, but he had a very high tolerance in the sense that he learned a bunch of tricks. He was the coolest pig ever. And I used little greens and things like that. But after that antibiotic use, he had this mushy poop for 18 months. And if you can imagine the horror of it all, he was one of those that actually did not want to be caught until I trained him to do stuff. And then he trained me after that. And so the horror of being held and had to clean balls of poop off his nails was horrible. And it was very disrespectful. He thought it was very rude. And I thought there was no hope for him. And literally, I tried diet changes, tried cutting greens, tried treating for yeast. We tried everything. 2 days on Sherwood, he was a new man. This is poop from like day 2, and it may not be the most beautiful, but it was the most beautiful thing in the world to me. And, you know, when you're seeing them chirp in pain from going through all kinds of stuff, it was absolutely remarkable. And for him, just like Buns, I think it was a lot of those ingredients, you know, maybe the molasses, the grains and stuff like that, that did not allow his bacteria to bounce back. So again, if you're struggling with something like that, there's hope for those guys, even when it seems hopeless. And he went on to live, you know, over 7 years and did great. And he actually passed from another weird ailment, but that's what we like to get. They all know me for getting the weird stuff. You can go to the next one. I showed you a bit about Diggs. So before he was with Wilbur, he was with Zen. And originally, because I have this awesome before and after picture, I was going to introduce you to Diggs. But I think Zen has a very similar and very great story. And she had this awesome poop you see here, the clumps. She had mucus on her poop, all kinds of things. You can see here, I adopted him at age 7. He was in that rescue the whole time. So yeah, it's pretty rough. And you can see he was kind of chubby. He looked a little bit dull. He didn't move around a whole lot. But at the time I was like, I mean, he's over 8 years old. That's normal. Until again, you know, I was going through the butt baths thinking they were normal. Both of these two, I had 10 rabbits at the time. These two were my butt bath kids. And if you've ever done that, you know, it's quite very fun to do. These guys changed all of that, but so much more. You know, I was trying this out of the digestive issues, but you can see he was a little chubby and all that. He got the most beautiful fur. He leaned down. This kid started zooming around and living his best life around age 8, 9 years old, and he was still doing that at age 12. They called him Benjamin Button. He was just like a little ball of lightning. This was actually him downstairs. He started going down there with Zen, and it was really amazing. So it can do a lot of things that you're not expecting. And it just blew me away because he and Mr. Lyric, you met, had really, really smelly urine. And if you've had that fun, it can change everything for you, especially if they're in your room like Lyric. But that is examples of like nutrition related where we can really change it, you know, just with some very simple, no digestive support, none of that stuff, just a difference in food. Go to the next one. Then we have Mr. Wilbur. So after Zen passed from E. caniculi, he was with Mr. Wilbur here. If you remember, I told you to remember Bun's colon. You remember how small that was? This is the same size rabbit, same breed, everything. You see that massive tube. And you can see he's got this really big cecum, and you can see some gas and all that. Just to tell you, that was a completely normal day for him. I went to the vet with him because I wanted to confirm that he was megacolon. You'd see he had like all the different inconsistent size and shapes of poop, which is very common across the board for megacolon. They're all a little different. That's actually him before and after digestive support, so it worked really well for him. But that is the difference in a rabbit with genetic poop issues as opposed to just like dysbiosis or something like that. He did really well, but you know, it's not one of those perfect things. It's kind of, you know, figuring out. Those guys are kind of their own puzzle. You'll hear from people that love extruded pellets or say that's horrible for theirs, or some that can eat a ton of greens and one can't look at them. They're just all a little bit different. They don't tend to absorb nutrients like our average everyday rabbits that are healthy. So they're kind of a puzzle too, but they can do really well and live, you know, long lives now. They used to live very short time, but it's just, if you've ever heard that megacolon is not a thing, you know, all you have to do is like show them these and then say, it's absolutely, that's where it gets its name, is that huge colon. All right. Okay, so why it keeps getting worse. The problem doesn't stop, it compounds. You have that bad bacteria and you just keep getting all these issues. You're still avoiding all that calcium and stuff, but we're still seeing like the sludge and things like that. So we'll get more into that here. So there is a lot of more geeky science. And again, we're going to touch on that nutritional balance. And I apologize for how nerdy this gets. I'm a big nerd. But calcium has always been villainized, right? We all hear you have to avoid that calcium. But if you imagine these guys are made to be food for other animals in nature, they already have soft skeletons in comparison to like their very strong muscles. And we don't want to make them even more deficient in calcium. So we want to help you avoid something else. So basically, it goes into imbalance and why their bodies produce carbonate. So if we go to the next one, here's a really geeky science slide. And all this is to say is that when we're feeding them those things, and you saw across the board how like potassium and magnesium may be higher, and you have very few negatives. So basically we're feeding them a lot of these positively charged ions, not a lot of negatives like chloride and sulfate, things like that. So their body's answer to that is to produce carbonate. Well, instead of, we think of calcium carbonate stones, so basically they're making their own Tums, calcium oxalate. So we think of it as a calcium issue, but really we want to seek to prevent that carbonate from needing to be formed in the first place. And we can do that by balancing the diet and cutting those greens. And again, it's tough to do that when you're doing like the mixed diet. So if you do it with just like a pellet that's balanced for you, and they've done all the nerdy stuff and all the difficult stuff, and then hay, which is like deficient in a lot of those things, so it's not giving them that off balance as well, we can prevent things like that carbonate formation. You want to go to the next one. Sometimes, like little Koa here, you have to put your detective hat on. And if you are dealing with like a stones or sludge or something like that, you can get your own pH strips and ammonia levels. And one thing we've also been taught to think of these guys as having very basic urine, like up in the 9 range. And I've even heard lower pH is an emergency. But if you're giving them just hay and pellets that are balanced in a great way, they're going to have much lower, much more balanced pH. It's going to be even in the 7 range. And it can be absolutely healthy because we tend to see those stones and sludge up there in that higher, more basic urine. So the goal here is just to test it, which you can get these really cheap. The pH strips are really cheap on Amazon. You can get them really quick and they come with a whole bunch. If you do test like morning and night, and you can see that it may be higher in the morning, which is why we want them filling up on that hay in the evening. You can get the ammonia strips too, especially if you have smelly urine and things like that. Not as important, but again, we don't want any ammonia in there. We want that smell to go away. So you go to the next one, and again, balance is the key. If you have smelly urine and you're embarrassed and hiding behind your litter box like that, there is help for those guys. I know I hear so many people that have like partners or spouses that are like, get rid of them, they stink. We don't want them to smell. That's just another one of those puzzle pieces or clues that they're giving us that say there's just a little bit of tweaking that we can do to help make that go away. Lyric, again, in the bathroom, he was my smelly kid that was in my room that I would change the litter box at midnight because I couldn't handle it. And now, I mean, he's been in there for years, you know, since this. So he was about a year when I switched, and he's been, you know, with me for over 9 now. So that can be helped as well. So the Sherwood way, you know, it's a little bit different. Again, it's not necessarily more pellets or less pellets, but all highlighting that nutritional balance. And part of that is that hay. Go to the next one. So our chart, and this is just going to be kind of a representation of the million other charts you're going to see out there. Generally speaking, hay is always the foundation. And that is great because it is so important. But you're going to see anywhere from like 10 to 30% greens recommended. It may not have like fruit on it. A lot of that treat's going to be at the top, and you're going to have like the pellets. And we are just hay and pellets with that little tip being treats. And that includes greens and everything else. So treats can be good, snackies can be good, but hay is definitely the way. And just a little bit different pyramid there for you to make it a little clearer. Next one. But not all hay is created equal. And some of you might be familiar with my hay study. Now, I'm not going to hit on that too much, but just to say that it came out of having rabbits that I introduced like some soft orchard to. And grass hay is grass hay, right? I didn't think anything of it until 2 of those rabbits, these 2 here, Reiki and Lyric, started to pee outside the litter box and have sludge for the first time in like 7+ years I'd have them. And it actually took me days to figure out, oh, duh, that's what I changed. And to be fair, at the same time, I was giving second cut Timothy that was coming way too soft. It had no stems to it. So those 2 combined were just too much, too rich. But it sprang about an entire hay study where I tried different types and cuts for months. And the results got so cool that I could literally put them on like a 3rd cut, or like that soft orchard ended up being the worst of the study. And as a group of 7, they put on over 700 grams in 1 week. And I could put them on first cut the next week and they would lose it. And a lot of people say, well, I don't want my rabbit to lose weight. Again, they're going to be losing that fat, not that healthy muscle. So that's going to maintain. It's also going to be great for energy, for those big golden poops. If your rabbit will eat first cut Timothy, like I know some of us struggle with that, it is absolutely phenomenal. It's got all that high fiber, low protein and nutrients, so it's not as rich, and it's great. If they won't, Kian Buns, who is very picky, she actually had larger poop on the 2nd cup because she would eat more of it. Great option as well. You can even blend. Right now, my guy's got picky and they're on a blend of the 1st and 2nd, but it can make a huge difference. You can actually watch pH and ammonia levels change on that as well. So 3rd cut, I know so many people have those bunnies that just will not eat anything else. And I will tell you that I have heard so many issues and seen so many fixes just by cutting that out. It is very high in protein and nutrients and low in fiber. So you can get those cecotropes, you can get those stasis bunnies that are just so puzzling. You're like, why is this happening? And all to come around, and it's 3rd cut Timothy. So while they may love it, just like they did that soft orchard, they're generally going to have those small dark poops because they're nutrient rich as opposed to fiber, and higher ammonia, pH, smell, all kinds of different things. So I would just stay away from that if at all possible. It has its place. If you have those bunnies that went through stasis or medical procedure, they were just rescued. All right, we have 10 minutes left. So bear with me, guys. If they are just rescued and they're out there eating fresh grass and now they're like, what is this dried garbage? You may have dealt with that. It can be great even to blend in or give as a treat or use to get them back. Again, we want to kick off that factory and get it moving again if it stopped. So it can be okay at certain times, but there's a time and a place. As far as being their hay, that is their sole diet, it is just really tough to do without having issues, at least eventually. Yeah, next one. And to that, I want to say there is hope for those guys too, or say you have those dental bunnies that are missing molars and they can't eat hay. Hay is so important, right? We want them to get all that fiber. That's how we keep their little factory moving. There are pellets out there that are made for those guys too, whether you have those guys that can't eat it or won't, or they don't eat enough. There are pellets, and I know it's horrifying. We're so used to looking at these pellets, and we want them to be on that small portion, and we see like people free feeding and we're horrified. But all these are, like I know Sherwood's versions, it's that small, dense nutrition from that small portion, but diluted down with a ton more hay so that they're able to eat more of it, get all that healthy fiber in a way that's very beneficial. And I know when we hear long stem fiber, we think of like a big stem of hay, but really for rabbits, it's only 1.7 millimeters and makes a difference between it going passing, going to cecum. For guinea pigs, it's only like 0.7, so very small, so you can get all that long stem fiber, and that's why normal recovery food is going to be even good long stem fiber. Those fine grinds are not meant to be long term. It's more for stomach tubes and things like that, because those are not all your fiber that you need. But there is hope for those guys. And on that calcium issue, I can tell you that there is a taboo around alfalfa. But again, it comes down to the balance. I, as a vet tech years ago, was horrified by Sherwood because at the time they only had alfalfa-based foods. 8+ years later, I am still using them. And I use these two down here as an example of how you can do that in a healthy way. So this is Knox and Bumble. They've been with me for 8 years, about the same time that I've been using Sherwood. They have been on a small portion alfalfa food that entire time. And knock on everything, they have never been to the vet for anything outside annuals and vaccines in their life. They look the same as they did years ago. She's a little Vegas bunny. She'll actually have been with me 8 years in May, and he just hit his 8 years. So it can be absolutely amazing if it's done right, again, with that balance. So not trying to prevent that calcium, but trying to prevent the stuff that binds to it. So those are my little go-tos. And I have that little fact up there because I was blown away. And if you've ever struggled, like say you buy hay every month, like I go through like 80 pounds a month.
How many rabbits do you have?
I have 9. And 3 guinea pigs for good measure, which is crazy because I'm crazy. I'm obsessed with them. And if anybody knows these two on Facebook, it's Pie and Archer, the wildest boys in the West. But it's just, it makes all the difference in the world, just having that balance be what we're focused on. I started all of mine, I had 10 at the time, I had the 3 guinea pigs. I started them all on that blend of Timothy and alfalfa because, again, scared of the alfalfa and it at least had Timothy in it. Still have 8 of my 9 are on alfalfa pellets. I have a guinea pig on, or 2 guinea pigs on the alfalfa. I've used all of them, love them all. They're all made to be all the nutrition they need and in a way balanced for health.
So I had heard that if the alfalfa is in the pellet, that's okay, but not to feed the alfalfa hay. So
yes.
Feed Timothy hay first or second.
Absolutely.
And then with the pellets, if it has alfalfa in them, that is okay if it is just in the pellet.
Yeah, as long as it's balanced in a way, like again with that chloride and things like that. Alfalfa itself is very rich. And another thing we do differently is we switch babies over to adult food at just 8 weeks. Unless they're large breeds, those guys are growing rapidly for a lot longer. And it's not when they're adults, but it's when their rate of growth starts to slow and they don't need all that high energy from the food. But we never recommend feeding alfalfa, even to babies. You can go right to the Timothy food. The baby food has alfalfa in it in a way, again, that's beneficial so that it's not too rich for them, because alfalfa can be great. It's full of protein and all these other great things, but it is rich. And if you look at like oat hay, it's one of those kind of crazy hays that's high in everything, like fiber and fat and all these other things. But it can be really great in a pellet. Again, you don't need it. The Timothy pellets are fantastic, but they're all options here if you have piggy rabbits or something. I've used all of them. I've switched back and forth in every which way. It's really wild when you get a rabbit that slows down on eating, that they may prefer one over the other, and not even necessarily the alfalfa ones. Like Pro used to be like what they loved, but now I've had one that Lyric got into the measured Timothy. He's like, heck yes. So all good, but it can be done, and it can absolutely be done in a healthy way. Next one, we hit our 5-minute mark. So where you go from here. So if you've ever dealt with any of those issues like sludge and everything, you're not doing it wrong. You're just missing some of that context. You know, can we go to the next one? So this is my Lola. So she fortunately got a good start, and she's been on it her whole time. But again, it's all about experimenting. We don't want you to just take our word for it. We want you to try tweaks and try different things, try cutting down, try different portions, whatever you'd like. We're here to help no matter what. So whether you use different food, don't care. I just am obsessed with them. Rescue is the best thing in the world. And if you have a rabbit and you're here, you know what I'm talking about. But we really do want you to try all these different things because, again, balance is what it's all about. And we think that's going to help them live a healthier and happier life. And we don't want to just, we put our money where our mouth is, I should say. And this is a little project we're working on. And I'm sorry, we got to wrap it up really quick, but it's basically 3 levels. Creamsicle there is my girl. She's like been my tester because she's so professional with the litter box. But it's going to have 3 levels to it. So one, they stand on, that poop and urine is going to go through. Poop will be caught in the second one. And we know we're obsessed with poop as rabbit people, so it's a great way to evaluate. I even found a ruler, I think it's an architecture ruler, that has different size circles. So for the hay study, I was measuring poop. And it's really wild. But you can also catch the urine down in the bottom, and it even has a spout, so you can pour it into a glass and measure the volume. You can see the color, you can see the sludge separate, and things like that. There's even a cool experiment you can do, but I don't have time to go through that. But I could talk all day, guys, I'm sorry. But if you want to go to the next one, that is just kind of to sum it up. It's all about nutritional balance and really trying to focus on the right parts of the diet and what we can do to make sure you guys don't think of stasis and all these problems, all those poop problems or sludge is something normal. Even those guys that are very sensitive like buns or have issues because of antibiotics or something like shrimp can find help too. And I would love to help put those pieces together if we can, so you can avoid some of these things, or maybe you have like the healthiest kids in the world and we want to keep them that way. Keep them running around well into their double digits. But that is it. If you have any questions, please hit me with them, or you can go to the next one. This is my contact info, whether you email, text, call. I'd love to talk to you. I also have my cards here if you didn't get one. I have my boys on there, Kai and Archer, because if you see them on Facebook, you'll know they're the most athletic, wild, mischievous men you could ever meet. But they're also a little thick, like me. And I am not perfect, and I'm not going to stand up here and tell you I'm right and you're wrong. That is absolutely not what I'm here for. Those guys do all kinds of performances for treats, so I was overdoing it too, and now they're on a strict snacky only diet because it's really easy to do. So I am not perfect, but I would love to help any way I can. And with that said, last slide here. We are on Facebook, Instagram, everything. If you just want to follow the crew or follow, talk to me. I have a lot of obsessed bunny communities. That is awesome. We're all here to help any way we can, whether, again, you use Sherwood or not. We want to help you prevent and solve those issues.
You had said that there were some Sherwood pellets that are with a better flavor, because I was telling you.
Yes.
Yeah. What are they called?
So I have some samples probably kind of way down there if you want to try them. But there are the 2 originals that a lot of people don't think of. And I used to not bring them because of the taboo with alfalfa, but they are still balanced in the same way to prevent and solve those issues. So if you want to try, there's a professional is the small portion alfalfa pellet. And then there's also the 50-50 blend that I started on and have a lot of my guys on now. So there's one, it doesn't have a great name. We're about to go through. If you guys are familiar with their bags, I can tell you now we're going to get a whole facelift. All kinds of things coming down the pipeline. So they're going to have better names to make them much easier. If you know, we also like to have 2 blue bags just to confuse everyone. That's all going to change. It's hopefully going to be much better later on, and they'll get names that are very descriptive so you know exactly what you're getting. But there's basically the Pro, which is a red one, and one with the lop on it is the blend. And sometimes it's the Measure Timothy that's their favorite right then, or it's like one of those guys, and those are good too. Any other questions? Or please feel free. I think we're gonna get kicked out of here really soon. But if you have questions, please reach out or come see me at the table down there. I'd love to help you out.